And now, broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California, your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
Here we go again. You are listening to the Radio Free California Network, and I am your host, former California State Assemblyman Tim Donnelly. And I really hate to say I told you so. Does that ever bother you to say I told you so to people?
No.
I knew you were going to say that. So, a huge headline. There's every story that's out on it is getting massive playback or feedback, excuse me. So you had these people all across the country demanding $15 an hour minimum wage. They're holding protests. They're shutting down McDonald's. They're demanding that they have a right to be plucked out of poverty and dependency, and that you owe them. It's just in order for them to have human dignity, you must pay them $15 an hour for their wages, for their labor. This was a nationwide movement. It was sponsored in large part, surprise, by the labor unions, because what the labor unions didn't tell the $10 an hour minimum wage workers was when you get a pay increase, it has consequences. And now that you're making $15 an hour, you're going to be ineligible for a lot of the freebies, the government welfare programs that you were getting. So now you've priced yourself right out of welfare. So now you're actually going to have to work harder, or you're going to have to cut back your hours so that you can stay on welfare and stay dependent to the government. So what was the whole point of $15 an hour minimum wage, which they kept claiming was to raise us out of poverty and grant us the human dignity to which we deserve? But they didn't want any of that.
No, they wanted to stay right where they were.
Yeah, but
all they're doing.
No, they want to get paid more for working less.
Right. But I'm sure you read in the article, it's so they can stay in subsidized housing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. The bottom line is you have a whole class of people who have bought into the lie by those who are perpetuating lies for a living, a.k.a. the Democrat Party, and in some cases the Republican Party, but in this case it's mostly the Democrat Party, who said you can have your cake and eat it too. So they thought that they could go out, demand higher wages, basically steal capital from the owner of the business. Now, the owner of the business, his goal or her goal is very simple. It's to make enough money to have a comfortable life, or make enough money to grow your business, make enough money to be able to fulfill your dreams. You wind up putting at risk a great deal of capital. We've had people on this show that own businesses, and they're always looking at the bottom line. And for some reason, none of the supporters of the $15 an hour minimum wage, who are actually minimum wage workers, actually stop to think, well, if I make more, then I'm going to lose the freebies I was getting from the rest of the taxpayers. So on the one hand, they're happy to steal more money away from the business owner. And I say steal because the business owner didn't say, hey, you're worth $15 an hour. I'd like to pay you $15 an hour. As a matter of fact, I'd like to give you some other fringe benefits on top of that, because you're really helping me in my business. You're helping me to be successful and achieve my goals. That's a voluntary contract. Nobody has any issues with that. But when you bring the government in, and the government brings this big stick, and it holds the stick over the head of the business owner, says, you're evil, you're a racist, you just really don't want any poor people to make it in this world. You want to keep them down. The only people keeping the minimum wage worker down is the minimum wage worker and those who are promising a higher minimum wage. Because minimum wage is not the key to success. Freedom is. Liberty is. Being able to go out and own your own business. If you went out and owned your own business, which takes blood, sweat, and tears and what something called capital, which is money that you invest and you never know if you're going to get it back, but you put it out there hoping that you'll be able to produce a greater return. That's the system in which no one on the left wants you to know that we are still a capitalist nation, even though they're charging hard toward turning this into a socialist country where the government controls or has more impact and more control over the means of production than the actual capitalist who puts up the capital. But it's hard to believe that you have adults in the United States of America who are out on the front lines protesting, and they get what they want. I guess maybe we need to say, be careful what you wish for. Because it's like, you got what you wanted. You and this happened in Seattle. They intimidated Seattle into approving a $15 an hour minimum wage. And now the people don't want to work. You know what I would do? I would fire them. I would say, if you don't want to work the hours because you're going to lose your government dependency, you're fired. We'll find somebody that actually wants to work for a living and not be dependent on the government, because I'm the one paying the taxes for you to sit around on your ass during those hours that you're not working because you don't want to threaten your eligibility to become dependent on the government. You forced me to pay you $15 an hour because the mantra was, it's immoral to have people making so little that they are forced to go on welfare. When the truth is, we now know that they're just lazy. They really just want to sit around on their ass, and they want you to pay for it. They want to get paid more for the worthless work that they do, but they don't actually want to do the business a favor. Not a favor. They don't want to actually be part of an actual American business, which has a set number of hours that you need to work in order to be on the payroll. If you're only going to work 3 hours a day because you don't want to actually impinge on your welfare, well, where am I supposed to find the other employee who's going to work the other 4 hours or 5 hours, whatever? What is the work day anymore? Is it an 8-hour day? Is that what we have here in America? I don't know, because I have pretty much always worked somewhere between 17 and 20 hours a day in my own business, and then in office and in the various endeavors that I've participated in. So I don't even understand that. All I know is, if you want something to succeed, if you want to get somewhere in life, you got to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, not depend on government. And certainly if your mentality is, I want to stay on a government program, you are headed for failure. You are headed not only for failure, but you are sentencing your children and your children's children to be dependent on government. Anyway, we're going to talk about this. Love to get your take. What do you think about this story out in Seattle about the $15 hour minimum wage and the fact that now the people who got it don't really want it because it's a threat to their government handouts? 323-746-TALK is our number. You're listening to the Tim Donnelly Show, and we will be right back after this short break. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. So here we are. The socialists and the socialist labor movement is having a bad day. This kind of blew up in their face, and I want to hear from you. I'm very curious what the average person thinks who works for a living. What do you think of this whole push for the $15 an hour minimum wage and how it's backfired? What would you do? I've already said what I would do, right? Did I say it?
Yeah.
I would fire them. You don't want to come into work the hours that I need you, then I don't need you. Have a nice life. Go sit around and be fully dependent on the government, because I'm not. Look, if you want to actually get off welfare and go somewhere with your life, and you came into my office and told me that, I would actually respect that. And I would say, you know what, here's a person that wants to go somewhere. I'd like to maybe help them. But that means you have to work really hard. And I'll teach you. I'll mentor you. But if you want to be dependent on the government for the rest of your life, you want your children to learn government dependency, it's so funny, because in a city like Seattle, you've been to Seattle, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you know that it's like the green capital of the world.
Right.
What do they always talk about? Sustainability. But they say it in hushed tones like it's, this religion. Sustainability. That's our goal. Okay. Well, it ain't financially sustainable to have everybody living off the government and having few. Picture this. You have people who are pulling a wagon, and then you have people who are sitting in the wagon. When too many people are sitting in the wagon and there's not enough to pull it, and you get down to maybe one person pulling and 18 in the wagon, God help you if you go up to the top of a hill, because somebody's going to die. You're all going to fall out. It's going to come to a crashing end, and you'll probably run over the taxpayer, the one who's doing all the work and exerting all the effort in the process, as you go screaming down the hill. But it's unsustainable. People need to work, and they need to contribute to their own future and their own success and their own destiny. That was always the vision of those who came to this country. It was never intended. They actually tried socialism. They tried communism early on, and it was an epic failure. Everybody died because you had people like you will always have. You had some people who worked really hard, and they got the same allotment of food and housing and everything else as those who didn't work at all. And pretty soon there was resentment, because human beings are equipped with human nature. And human nature is that if I work hard and in doing so, I'm able to put away a few dollars. I'm able to take a nicer vacation. I'm able to live in a nicer house. Maybe I can buy a boat and go to the river. I'm happy to do that. But if I told you that you're all going to throw all of the money into one pot. So it doesn't matter whether you earn $1,000 a week or whether you earn $200 or whether you earn $2. You're still going to eat, you're still going to get a place to live, and you're still going to have absolutely everything exactly the same way that everybody else has. And that is the battle within our society right now. You have the socialists and the communists who want to overwhelm the capitalists. And, you know, if you look at the presidential election, when you see the support Donald Trump's getting and you see the support Bernie Sanders is getting, it's rather fascinating because it does indicate that there's a certain bulwark of support for both of those positions. I would posit that far more people support capitalism than socialism and communism because socialism and communism are fundamentally immoral. Because you steal from those who do and you give to those who don't. You take from those who produce value in order to provide for those who produce no value. And that's it in a nutshell. And so here's the bottom line. The people, if we have any listeners in Seattle, the people that were protesting and shutting down the McDonald's in order to get a bigger paycheck are now cutting back on their hours so they can spend more time at home on the couch, enjoying all that good stuff like the energy drinks and the ice cream bars and the potato chips and everything else that they're buying with their EBT while they're in front of you in line.
Little Caesars.
No comment. Yeah, that's your fault. You have a pizza craving. But anyway, so what do you think of that? I mean, really, do you think it's right? Do you think it's moral? What do you think? If somebody worked for you and they came in and they said, look, I can't work as many hours because this has been a threat to my Section 8 housing. It's been a threat to my free food that I get paid by you, by the way. They don't even say thank you. They just say, this is my right. I'm entitled to it. And you're threatening my livelihood. Because your real livelihood, if you're dependent on the government, your livelihood is being dependent on the government. If you don't want to be dependent on the government, all you have to do is work harder, maybe work longer for a period of time, save your money, do without, sacrifice. I mean, we had Nick Ferguson on this show, the football player, the safety for the Denver Broncos, who said if his mom had never left government dependency and the projects and gone out on her own and taken the risk and struggled and sacrificed and gone to bed hungry, he wouldn't be in the NFL. So there's a huge payoff. There's a huge benefit if you do it on your own. But if you allow yourself to be dependent on the government, you're really only hurting yourself and your children because you're limiting their future. You're limiting your own. You're limiting your life to you're relegating yourself to being a taker, to being someone who doesn't believe that you can make it because you don't believe in yourself. And when you look in the mirror, I don't care how well you eat. If you didn't have to put any effort forth to produce that, then there's no pride. When you look in the mirror, you avoid your own eyes because you're ashamed. And I think it's interesting how people think they can get away from the fundamental law of economics and the fundamental laws of human nature. And they think somehow by protesting in the streets and demanding, quote unquote, justice. I mean, remember what many of these people were saying. They have an absolute right. It's human dignity to get $15 an hour. No, what you did is you used the government to steal from your employer. And now you're going to go to your employer and say, hey, I can't work as much for you. And the only smart thing your employer could do is fire your ass and send you home and say, you know what, sit on the couch full time And I'm going to find somebody that actually wants to work for a living. And I don't know. That's what I would do. Give me a call and let me know if you would do something different. 323-746-TALK is our number, and that's the headline. We'll be talking about a number of stories. We've got some great guests coming up. We're going to be talking about the IRS and how they tried to extinguish the Tea Party. And we've got another guest coming up, too, and I'll tell you about her later. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial. If you've been listening long to the Tim Donnelly Show, you know that we talk constantly about defending freedom and about defending our natural inalienable rights. The Firearms Policy Coalition is a partner of the Tim Donnelly Show. But more than that, they're on the front lines every day in Sacramento and all across the state, in the courts, defending your Second Amendment right, that is a natural right that the government merely acknowledged in the Second Amendment. If you value your freedom, then you need to join Firearms Policy Coalition. Become a member. I'm a member, and I'm happy to support an organization that is doing such an incredible job. Go to joinfpc.org. The Tim Donnelly Show sent you. Or go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on the FPC link to make it easy. But whatever you do, join today. FPC.org.
Always dancing down the street with this way blue eyes. Every new boy that you meet, he doesn't know the real surprise. Here she comes again when she's dancing beneath the
You have to wait for the music to speed up and go into it. You don't even know who this is because you were a kid.
I was a kid, but
Yeah.
I mean, my mother raised me on great music.
Wow. I don't know. I think music from my era is starting to make a comeback
It is.
with the Ute of America. So,
Yeah, the 50s are becoming popular again.
so I am so fascinated right now. I'm going to switch off the minimum wage topic for a little while. We're still going to go back to your calls. So if you want to call on that, that's fine. But there's a headline. There's a couple of headlines up on the Drudge Report today about Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton. Now, it's no surprise, but do you remember the woman that outed Monica Lewinsky?
I was a little young then,
You're still a little young.
but I do remember the whole scandal.
Right. So it was one of the women who worked in the office, and she had a pretty significant position. Her name was Linda Tripp. She's now 65 years old, and she is coming out and saying it was Hillary, not Bill, who was the real story.
What?
Yeah, that Hillary manipulated and stage managed the story of her husband's infidelity with Monica, converting herself from a lackluster first lady with an unimpressive approval rating to admirable first victim. The blindsided wife standing by her man. And she talks about, she's the one who recorded conversations with Lewinsky. Remember, that's why they could not deny it. Now, come on. All right. Let's see if we can get Bill on the phone and see what his take was. Oh, do you have him? Can you put him through?
Yeah, let me patch him through real quick.
Oh, hey, Bethany, how you doing today?
Hey, Bill, how are you doing?
Yeah, so I see that I'm in the headlines again. And I just want to say something.
Let me hear it.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Hillary Clinton. I mean, Miss Monica Lewinsky. I haven't been with her in years. And
Well, yeah, it's now 2015.
I do not recall. But it really depends on what the meaning of the word is. Because that's the question. And they're going after my wife as a way to get me. This is all part of a right-wing conspiracy. And you know what? In the end, it's going to come out. I know where all the bodies are buried. And I am going to name names. You can mark my words on that. Well, Mr. President, that's quite a challenge. And I think we're going to see a lot more coming out of that story. But Linda Tripp says that she orchestrated the cover-up. Now, by the way, just for those of you who are actually thinking about voting for Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush, meaning you don't do a whole lot of thinking, the politics is not about policy. It's about people. And people can understand this story much more than they are going to get into the emails and her being a horrible Secretary of State and what she did or didn't do at Benghazi. Even though those are much more serious issues, much more relevant issues, this one goes to her character and it goes to how she reacted. And really, I think people are going to vote based on whether they felt for her as the victim or whether or not they are paying attention to what she did as Secretary of State and the scandals involving the cash, her unwillingness to be forthcoming with the emails. That will be an issue for some people, but other people are just going to vote, hey, I like her. And I don't know if this will be enough to change their minds. But Linda Tripp said that when early on let me just read from this article. According to Tripp, in her mind, she would be part of a coronation instead of an election. She, meaning Hillary Clinton. This had been planned for so many years. I remember one of the quotes in my first week in the Oval Office, which was the week after Bill Clinton's first inauguration. Everybody had this mantra: 8 years for Bill, 8 years for Hill. And when I asked a senior person, what does that mean? He said, well, 8 years for his administration and 8 years for hers. So this is a runaway train. Nobody's going to stop it. Tripp explained, I think the most compelling thing about Hillary is that she will stop at nothing to achieve her end, and that she views the public as plebeians, easily seduced into believing her point of view. And this is a woman whose office was directly adjacent to Hillary's second floor West Wing office. Think, what's that lady's name on House of Cards? Come on, you got Frank Underwood and Claire, right? So think Claire.
I have no idea. I don't watch TV.
You haven't watched House of Cards?
Nope, never.
Wow.
I watched Seinfeld.
Well, yeah. Well, you're not alone there. I'm going to go to the phones and see what you think. Hey, welcome to the Tim Donnelly Show. How you doing?
Hey, Tim, it's Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, this thing with Hillary is just beyond belief. I mean, the fact that she can lie the way she is, she can act like she never knew things, and whatever her husband did was okay, and she just stood by and watched women be treated the way they were. There's so many reasons not to vote for her, and when somebody asks what her accomplishments were, nobody's jumping at the table to say, here they are. But the issue with Benghazi, and everybody who's served knows that we have quick reaction force teams, QRS. Their job is to wait for a phone call and then to go act, not to get all this intelligence and all these videos, all this inside information, and then make a decision on what they're going to do. They're trained to act on a moment's notice. That's why they're called quick reaction forces. So when Benghazi happened, there were people there that's jobs, and they'd already trained on doing some of these things, was to go there and help these people out. They get trained all the time on how to help people in emergencies, how to shoot, how to fire, how to react.
Hey, Mike, how
when they're
long?
told to stand down. How
long do you think, or how quick do you think they could have had a team there? Do you have any idea on that?
Well, it's more, the stories I've heard is they were, within an hour there, no problem. Within 4 hours, they were able to put together a crew that they could have flew in there. But I think the rule that we have is usually like no more than 3 to 4 hours separation between our teams and our missions. So that there's always something, even at the prison camps like Camp Bucca and other places, we always had a QRF team somewhere around. And it could have been a different military, but there was always a team around. So if you could withstand the firepower within an hour, you might have a shot. You knew you had to probably get at least an hour.
Right.
Within 3 hours, you knew you were probably, you're pretty safe. Someone's going to get there. And, so when they were, being attacked at, up there in Benghazi, it just, the only thing I can think of is these people that are sitting there thinking, as time goes by, we're going to get saved. Well, especially after you start getting an hour, 2 hours into things, it's like, now there's more hope because there's no way we're going to let you sit there and die.
Yeah.
But then, this argument that there was a stand-down order. Well, they made it pretty clear there was a stand-down order. Somebody told them not to go do their job.
Well, I've talked with Dorothy Woods, the widow of one of the SEALs who was on top of the building, and he was the leader. He was the top guy there, and one of his guys told him, "Hey, I've got to, I just hope I live long enough to see my 3-month-old." And he sent that guy down. He didn't tell anybody that he also had, a brand new child who had just been born that he hadn't seen. And he stayed up there. And he ultimately was killed when the final bombs hit the roof. But he believed, I'm sure he believed that they were coming. Because like you said.
Well, yeah, those guys were trained, and not to mention they may have been on a QRF team. Most of us have been on a team at least once. What the odds are, and the longer you go, the better it is. And a lot of times they'll tell us, if you can just hold out as long as you can. Help's going to be on the way if you can get the call in. Now, obviously, if you can't make a call, there's going to be issues. But here's a place that was attacked that had live video feeds going into the White House. Here's a QRF team that could have watched video and seen where the enemy was, which is something that would be very rare for a QRF team, to actually know where everybody's at, know how to do a plan, and how to get in there and get people out. There, you look at our going after bin Laden and all the other things that we've done, and how we can do things without losing any lives at all the way back to the mission where the 500 were saved by the 1st Ranger Group that went in there and did the heroics that they did. They made movies about that over and over again. The Great Escape. It's the we change all the time. Plans change all the time. So even if you get information, it doesn't mean it's going to be good. You're trained to do something, and it doesn't matter what the circumstances. You adapt to it and you adjust. Like the Marines say, adapt, adjust, overcome. That's the way it is. That's combat. You don't expect everything to go a certain way, because if you do, you're in trouble. But the fact that they stood there with those coffins and tried to act like they did everything they could when they did absolutely nothing. And then when they tried to make it about that stupid cartoon, I was actually still in the Wounded Warrior, Warrior Transition Project. And I stayed up late for some reason and watched the news. And when I heard about, the president claiming it was a cartoon that had already been out for a couple of months, that nobody cared about because it was stupid and it was even yanked because nobody wanted to even see the stupid thing. And he went out and started doing that. And then there was more attacks on more embassies, more riots were happening, more people hated America because of what the president did. And then they sent flyers out apologizing and saying that it was the act of one stupid idiot that did it. And the whole time we know. The minute somebody jumped on top of that fence and had a black Al-Qaeda flag, it doesn't take a genius or an intel guy to tell you that there's no way that wasn't planned, because those flags aren't sold at Kmart. They're not something you buy in the store. there was Al-Qaeda there. They were ready to put the flag up, and they did. That alone told us, and especially people like me, that it was well planned. They knew what they were doing, and they had it all set up. And it's no way that it happened without them knowing. That's why they were begging for help, because they knew it was coming. And then for it to be on 9/11,
Exactly.
I really hated the fact that I had to call Commander-in-Chief, but it's embarrassing.
Unfortunately we got to take a break, but can you hold over for one break?
Sure.
Hey, if you find yourself in my hometown of Twin Peaks, don't leave without stopping by the grill at the Antlers Inn. It's right in the heart of Twin Peaks. They serve dinner every night. They're right there at Highway 189 and Bear Springs Road. They have the best steaks, the best sushi. No matter what you have, make sure you call ahead for a reservation. 909-336-2600. 909-336-2600. And tell them Tim Donnelly sent you. Hey, you're listening to the Tim Donnelly Show. We stream live at the timdonnellyshow.com website. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter. You can catch up on past shows. You can share it with your friends. 323-746-TALK is our number. And going back to the phones, we're talking with Mike from Wrightwood. Mike, so I didn't really want to interrupt you because you're really hitting some great points on the hypocrisy of Hillary Clinton standing with the dead that she refused to help and pretending she had done everything she could when she really just doesn't care. I mean, I think that came through in the Senate hearing. Didn't you think so?
It's not just that. It's the entire administration. There's in New Mexico, I talked to the radios a lot out there, and we had a few people that would get pissed at people that were veterans, and of course, active duty. We couldn't say anything that would call up and say anything negative toward the president. And it's like, well, number one, we do have freedom of speech, which is, you're going to say we fought for it, let us have it. When we got almost 30 million veterans in this country, we all see the same thing. We all fought, or we all signed up. Some, of course, didn't because they had drafts that are still around, but they still probably, get to go to the VA and say they served. But then when we see our people coming back and we see that flag over that coffin, and we know these people don't care, and it's when we had an incident where there were 4 or 5, I think, members that were brought home, and they asked the families if they could take pictures because Obama decided he wanted to go and do a photo op, and they said no. And I don't know how many people know this, but what Obama did was he had photos taken of him in the helicopter and taken a step off so that he didn't break what Congress had put down, that there couldn't be photos taken without permission. And I thought that was the most cowardly thing I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, it pretty much set me through the roof. The families made it clear that they didn't want him there. And something other people don't know is that, President Bush was always meeting the soldiers that came home, if they came home in a box, and the families. He was always there. He didn't need a camera. He didn't need an excuse. He still to this day goes to Fort Hood and sees disabled and wounded veterans. And his dad, of course, has a library not far from there. But those are the ones that care, whether they should have been sent there, and everybody wants to argue these other points. But those are commanders in chief, like Reagan, that actually, when he said he cared for us, we believed it. Nobody that puts that uniform on, or at least I'd say 90% of at least the ones I've talked to, don't believe that this president cares whether we're there or not, and would prefer that somehow he can just basically get rid of us and get us out of his way. I don't know what he thinks is going to happen one day, and somehow that we're going to maybe uprise against him. But, everybody that wears that uniform wears it to take care of people in this country. And all they ask is in return is that they're allowed to do their job. And the fact that we go into Iraq, we take a nation apart, we wipe out a military, we take out a government, and we're scared to say it's a victory, I don't understand what it is. We don't need to look at what happens years down the line. You know, if you talk to Hillary or you talk to these other people offline, and I've talked to a lot of politicians about why we never declared victory, people that are running for office who said they were going to make sure that was done. Then they get in there and they stop. They don't want to declare victory. And it's like when we went into Japan, we declared victory way before Japan got back on their feet. When we took out Germany, we declared victory. We didn't care if they got back on their feet. And here we are going into a country like that and taking them down and doing what we did, and we never declared victory. We've lost a lot of people, and I've lost a couple of friends personally. They deserve that. Their families deserve to know that there was a victory, that we were sent there, and that we have to go to the hospitals and we're having our surgeries and we're going through our treatments because we did something that mattered. They wanted to create another Vietnam, and they're doing their damnedest to do it.
Well, Mike, on behalf of myself and I would say our entire listening audience, and if you can't say thank you for your service, then you probably shouldn't be listening to my show. But I want to say thank you for your service and for what you did. And we did overcome, and we did have a victory. And just because some worthless politicians can't acknowledge it means nothing, because you were combating evil and you were defending freedom. And it doesn't matter whether that's popular or not, because it was right. Hey, thanks for your call, Mike. We gotta go up against a long break here, but always enjoy talking to you.
All right, thanks. Have a good day, guys.
Well, it's been a tough day for Hillary Clinton. I'm going to go back to this story because, by the way, Linda Tripp, the person that exposed Bill's philandering, was, of course, a Democrat. And but her issue is not Bill in dredging up the past, but this is what she said. Speaking today, she revealed, "I believe that for all his faults, Bill Clinton is not as unscrupulous as his wife. He is complicit, but he is not as deceitful as Hillary Clinton is." Don't get me wrong. They're both missing the integrity chip. But while she is inherently dishonorable, his seems to be learned behavior. Hillary Clinton ruled the White House even as early as 1993, and every scandal that had originated in the Clinton administration was the brainchild of Hillary. When I think of Hillary Clinton, I think of a lingering taint of scandal and wrongdoing, and in my opinion, possible criminal activity. And behind it all, according to Tripp, the pursuit of the Clintons' common goal, power. You know, I can't help it. And I guess I can't talk to you because you don't watch House of Cards, but it sounds like the script of House of Cards, which is you have a man who comes to power, and then he brings his wife into everything, and she pretty much controls him, and by controlling him, controls the entire presidency, essentially, which, I don't know. It certainly is interesting. But there's also an article by Camille Paglia. And Camille Paglia is one of my most favorite liberals. She is a classic liberal. And she is constantly writing pieces that embarrass the Democrat Party because she's intellectually honest. And she has written a number of things about this whole scandal, but she's got a piece out today comparing Bill Clinton to Bill Cosby, and said that she saw early on that this is going to be a huge problem for a Hillary Clinton presidency because it brings it all back up. And she makes an interesting point about, here, let me scroll back up. I'm being green again. I'm not actually printing things out. Oh, you're putting your fist in the air when I say I'm being green? What are you, some kind of a... I guess I'm not going to even get into that. Hold on a second. Here we go. Right from the start, when the Bill Cosby scandal surfaced, I knew it wasn't going to bode well for Hillary's campaign because young women today have a much lower threshold for tolerance of these matters. The horrible truth is that the feminist establishment in the United States, led by Gloria Steinem, did in fact apply a double standard to Bill Clinton's behavior because he was a Democrat. The Democrat president and administration supported abortion rights, and therefore it didn't matter what his personal behavior was. But we're living in a very different time now. And young women have absolutely no memory of Bill Clinton. It's like ancient history for them. There's no reservoir of accumulated goodwill. And the actual facts of the matter are that Bill Clinton was a serial abuser of working class women. He had exploited that power differential even in Arkansas. And then in the case of Monica Lewinsky, I mean, the failure on the part of Gloria Steinem and company to protect her was an absolute disgrace in feminist history. What bigger power differential could there be between the president of the United States and this poor innocent girl? Not only an intern, but clearly a girl who had the kind of pleading, open look to her, someone who was looking for a father figure. I was enraged. My publicly stated opinion at the time, this is Camille Paglia writing in Salon.com, was that I don't care what public figures do in their private life. It's a very sophisticated style among the French and generally in Europe, where the heads of state tend to have mistresses on the side. So what? Doesn't bother me. But the point is, they are sophisticated affairs that the European politicians have, while the Clinton episode was a disgrace. Absolutely. It was frat house stuff, and Monica got nothing out of it. Bill Clinton used her. Hillary was away or inattentive. And see, Hillary may think that she's going to just ride on to power, but something is keeping her down. I mean, she certainly has the money. She has the name ID. She has people that love her and people that hate her. But in the end, and I'm curious, if you're thinking of voting for Hillary, I would love to hear your rationale or your reason. And if you're thinking of voting for Hillary, why wouldn't you just vote for Jeb Bush? I mean, they're basically identical except for the hair color. And Jeb Bush, while being a full-on liberal, is... Now, I don't know for sure, but I want to say that he doesn't have as much baggage. Now that I've said that, I'm going to wind up with egg on my face if we find out that Jeb Bush is... Well, I guess we're not going to find out he's secretly a Democrat. I think everybody knows that. But it's anyway. We are living in interesting times when you have a feminist like Camille Paglia attacking Bill Clinton and by default attacking Hillary Clinton. And then on the flip side, you have a Democrat that worked in the White House that knew everything. I don't know how she gets past this. But we're going to bring on a friend of mine, Ginny Rapini, who leads up one of the largest tea parties in the state of California and in the country. Ginny, welcome to the Tim Donnelly Show.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to talk to you. And you give me a little background. You co-founded a tea party back in, what year was it?
2009.
2009, right when all of that happened.
Right.
And your tea party became the largest in the state of California. Am I wrong on that?
Well, there's some other really good groups, and I don't think size matters as much as that the work that we get done. So yeah, we were able to launch 31 groups back in 2009 and 2010.
Wow.
And we actually still network with a good portion of those groups.
Right. I've spoken at many of them.
Yes.
And it's interesting how you say that, because by launching groups, you wind up with grassroots organizers in every community, essentially, or every region of the state. And and you guys obviously became perceived by the IRS and by the government itself as a threat.
Yes, we did. In fact, other Tea Party groups in the southern part of the state were asked, when they were applying for 501c4 status, they were asked if they worked with us, with the NorCal Tea Party.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the IRS wanted you to list every single one of your members who attended meetings, and they wanted to they wanted to know everything about the people who were actually joining you, almost as if they were like the government way back when under McCarthy searching for communists. But instead, they're searching for patriots that want... I mean, what is your crime? You wanted to hold the government accountable for what they did with our money. You wanted to hold them accountable for interfering in our lives and then by default, not even doing the things they were supposed to do as enumerated by the Constitution, like securing our border and providing for the national defense and, building infrastructure. Instead, they're busy trying to tell us how to live and what to think.
That's right. That's right. And I don't think that there's any argument with even those in the middle and some even on the left that have seen that the federal government has gone way beyond its enumerated powers given to them by the Constitution. And so that has been, our goal has only been, our core values are fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, and free markets. Now, what is offensive about that?
I was just talking to a Democrat earlier today. She's actually a former Democrat.
Bless your heart.
And everything that you just stated, she believes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting how the government has worked so hard to keep us divided by these parties and these affiliations and tries to get us to distrust and hate one another when all we're trying to do is come together and demand that the government actually listen to us.
That's right. That's right. It's amazing how people hate the Tea Party, but they don't know why. We were in the 4th of July parade in Auburn, and several of our members walk behind our float, and they go and shake people's hand, and one guy wouldn't shake his hand. And he said, "Why don't you like the Tea Party?" Or he said, "Why won't you shake my hand?" He said, "I don't like the Tea Party." He said, "Why?" And he didn't know why. Because he's been told by the media he should hate the Tea Party.
That's right.
But when you understand what we stand for, that's where most Americans are.
Absolutely. Jenny, we got to take a quick break. Can I hold you over?
You bet.
Hey, we're talking with Ginny Rapini, NorCal Tea Party founder and just an extraordinary patriot and great American. We'll be right back. And by the way, if you want to call in, 323-746-8255. You've heard me talk about Burro Canyon Shooting Park on this show many times. They've been a proud sponsor of the Tim Donnelly Show. And I want to let you know they've got a special offer. If you pay for a day of shooting at Burro Canyon Shooting Park and you mention the Tim Donnelly Show, you get a free hat or a coffee cup or both as long as supplies last. So head on up to my favorite place to exercise our Second Amendment right, Burro Canyon Shooting Park. You are tuned to the Radio Free California Network. I am your host, former California State Assemblyman and gubernatorial candidate. And I'm joined on the phone by Ginny Rapini, founder of the NorCal Tea Party. And Ginny, you brought up a great point, which is the media, in large part, turned people against the Tea Party. Nobody will forget when, I believe it was Andrew Breitbart, who defended the Tea Party because there were operatives within the White House and within the administration who were claiming that somebody at a Tea Party had gone into some racist rant and called some black member of Congress a racial epithet.
And spit on them.
And in spite of there being hundreds of thousands of cell phones rolling video, not a single person could find any evidence to back up this specious and outrageous claim. And Andrew Breitbart put up his own money,
right,
excuse me, offering to pay a bounty.
Right.
And nobody came forward.
That's because there wasn't anything. He put a good-sized bounty up, too. If I'm not mistaken, it was $100,000.
Yeah, and then he increased it, I believe. But it was just ludicrous. And he was, of course, roundly vilified. And he, much in the vein of Donald Trump, didn't care, never backed down. And so here's the thing. But something happened. It's one thing to have the media demonize you. You expect it if you're a threat to the Marxist progressive agenda. And if you're not in line with their narrative of the government is good and the government is great and the government is God. Mm-hmm. But then something more sinister happened. Because the IRS set its sights on this burgeoning movement called the Tea Party, of which you were a part, and you decided you wanted to form a 501c3, correct?
No, 501c4.
Oh, C4, excuse me.
And the reason I chose the 4 instead of the 3, 4 is not tax deductible, but I do not have to provide my donors' names.
Interesting. Well, that was actually brilliant on your part. So, but the Tea Party and many of the groups that formed 501c3s were targeted, and individuals were targeted for audit. And it wasn't because they had some pattern that raised a red flag where they had questionable income versus expense ratios or write-offs or anything like that. Mm-mm. And we all know this because they finally admitted it. They admitted that they targeted the Tea Party because the Tea Party was a threat to their existence. Because if we did what we should do and modernized our government, we wouldn't have an IRS. We don't need 97,515 people to force Americans to comply with the tax laws. There's easier ways to do it. You could actually have people figure out what their taxes are and pay them with the swipe of a credit card or something like that, especially if you simplified the tax code. Mm-hmm. But they chose to engage in political activity, cover it up, lie about it, things for which individuals ought to be in prison. And yet there really was no accounting. There was nothing that happened, but you have recently had a chance to get a much greater insight into what was really going on.
Yes. Well, it's been for about, let's see, we filed the class action lawsuit back in 2014. And was it 14 or 13? 14. And we are the only lawsuit still standing against the IRS.
Wow. And you came to some conclusions in the course of this process, and I don't know how much you can talk about. That's why I'm trying to sound. I'm sounding a lot more careful than I usually do.
I can talk about more than what I thought I could talk about. I was on the phone with my attorney yesterday, knowing I was going to be interviewed.
All right. Good. Because I do want to hold. We're going to have a break here in a minute or two, but I want to hold you over because I want to get into the details of what you can tell us, because I think it really gives Americans, especially our audience, an insight into something behind the scenes that they've never heard from anywhere else. And I'm dying to hear it. So, we will definitely dig down into the truth. Oh, she's telling me I got a minute 30. I'm cutting too early. But so tell me about your lawsuit and tease us a little bit for about 30 to 60 seconds here.
I will tell you that in March of 2010 is when we filed for our 501c4 nonprofit tax exempt status. And in July of 2010, they asked for more information, which I understand is not that uncommon. And at that time, we had only been in existence a year, and so I had a box about the size of a box of a shirt box. And so I said they wanted emails, and they wanted a copy of anything that I sent out. I had my leadership training manual because we had leadership training for those groups that we launched. So I had all that in there. And that was in July of 2010, and we never heard anything back from them until January of 2012. And at that time, I get a letter asking for 95 additional pieces of information. And I had 17 days to get it to them.
Wow.
And that's when they wanted everything. They wanted a list of donors. They asked for that the first time, too, but I didn't send it. I reminded them I'm filing for a 501c4.
Wow.
Therefore, this isn't applicable.
Hey, Jenny, we're going to have to hold you over, but don't lose that thought.
Don't you think it's about time you treat yourself or someone you love to something very special? Well, Ozell Jewelers, the finest jewelry store in the high desert, is known throughout the high desert for having the largest variety of fine-looking jewelry and gifts for every special occasion. Ozell custom designs and manufactures their own jewelry, so you'll be able to find exclusive, one-of-a-kind, stunning styles you won't find anywhere else in Southern California. If you're looking for fine jewelry at unbeatable prices, Ozell Jewelers is the place to go. Show appreciation to that special person in your life with something special to cherish forever. Ozell Jewelers, voted best jewelers in the high desert by the Daily Press regularly for years. Ozell Jewelers has been putting smiles on high desert faces for over 30 years. Ozell Jewelers in Rancho Cucamonga, Palm Desert, and Amargosa Road by Red Lobster in Victorville. Ozell Jewelers.
And keep your hands to yourself.
You're listening to the Tim Donnelly Show, and we're going to go straight back to our guest, Jenny Rapini, the founder of the NorCal Tea Party. And Ginny, you were starting to get into a little bit of the history of what happened between you and the IRS. And take it away, because we're dying to hear what happened and then get the update.
Well, I'll just give you a little sneak peek of some of those 95 items that they wanted to have me include in this huge box that cost me over $200 to ship to them. First, they said if I didn't have that to them in 17 days, that they would assume that I wanted to cancel my application and quit, which is what most of the Tea Party groups that were attacked did. Instead of doing that, it made me mad, and so I stayed up till the wee hours of the morning to get everything they wanted. They wanted copies of every email I had ever sent. They wanted receipts for everything we had ever done. They wanted transcripts from any speaker who had ever spoken. They wanted donor information, names, addresses, and telephone numbers of members. I didn't provide that for them. And what I did for the donors is I went to our PayPal account, and you can pull a report that shows the date and the amount, but it doesn't say who. So I gave them that. And I made copies of every single receipt. I'm a small business owner as well, and I know what the IRS can do, and I know what they're capable of. So I keep everything. And every event we had its own folder. I make copies of everything. By the time they wanted to know everything we had ever passed out at any meeting or any event. Yeah, so we passed out pocket constitutions, so I put one in there.
That's probably the first time many of them had seen that document.
Well, what's interesting is I did get that done, and I sent it registered mail because I wanted to have the receipt that I had sent it on time. And I didn't. That was in February of 2012, and I still didn't hear anything from them until July of 12. But I had to contact our Congressman Tom McClintock, who had given an impassioned speech on the floor of the House of Representatives a year prior to John, and John Boehner heard what the IRS was doing to the Tea Parties. He claimed he didn't know until 14, but he did know. But anyway, and McClintock wrote a scathing letter to the IRS telling them how they had violated my constitutional rights. About 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from the IRS telling me they were happy to report to me that I did get my certification after almost 3 years, by the way.
Wow.
And then it was just some young girl that called me, and she said, you really did send a lot of stuff. I said, hey, I didn't send anything you didn't ask for, and I did send a pocket constitution. I hope you read it.
I think we need to send the IRS after Hillary Clinton's emails and donors and records.
I like the Trey Gowdy's on that one. But after that is when we filed a class action lawsuit against the IRS. When I say we, Citizens for Self-Governance is the third-person funder for this. They have nothing to do with the interaction with the attorneys or anything like that. They interact with the plaintiffs only. And we got an amazing group of attorneys that have represented us. So when we filed that, Mark Meckler and I went back to Washington, D.C., and we did a press conference. And then we went on the Neil Cavuto show and then Tom Sullivan. And when I got done with those shows, I turned my phone back on, and my first 2 calls were death threats.
Wow.
After that. And I thought when we came back from this that this was going to really encourage the Tea Party people. I thought this is going to show them that we can stand up to the IRS. We don't have to be afraid. Instead, Tim, and this is sad, I got cards, letters, and phone calls from people who had been coming to our meetings, coming to our events, who said, oh, Jenny, I'm so sorry. We can't support you anymore. We can't come to your meetings anymore because we're afraid we're going to be audited.
Wow.
Really? Shame on them. Really?
Well,
you know
being audited is about the least of your worries with the IRS, which now has...
because they went after us personally, Tim. We are still dealing with the personal stuff they've done. It's cost us over $30,000 to prove our innocence.
Wow.
They garnished our wages. They even, wait till you hear this one. We send our taxes in, and whenever we send our taxes in, we send them certified because we've dealt with the IRS for years. My husband owns his own business too. We sent our taxes, and we had the receipt for it on April 12th. When are they supposed to be postmarked? The 15th? 3 months later, we get a bill from the IRS telling us that we owe them $7,600 for filing our taxes 3 days late. And, we couldn't talk to a human person. It took us 8 months and contacting our congressman to get a human person at the IRS. We sent copies of our letters. We sent copies of the receipt, with letters to the IRS. Never heard anything. They kept sending us threatening letters. They garnished our wages, telling us that we owed them this money.
So what happened recently? Are you able to talk about the deposing of the IRS? Because I would love to hear. We were talking the other day, and you had this extraordinary conclusion, which is commonsensical in a way.
My impression, when I was deposed by the IRS, there were 5 attorneys. 3 I couldn't see. They were in a box. They were back in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And there was one, there were 2 that actually were in the room with my attorney and me. And the one little gal kept sending notes to the attorney that was questioning me, and I finally said, "Is she allowed to talk?" He says, "Well, yeah, she's allowed to talk. She's not allowed to ask questions." He also was getting texts and emails from those that were in Washington, D.C. to ask certain questions of me. And he was if you didn't know who he worked for, you would think he's just kind of a Columbo kind of guy, a little... they'll probably get transcript of this somewhere, so I'll just describe him. He was a little poppin' fresh dough, Pillsbury Doughboy kind of guy, kind of charming, kind of a Columbo kind of...
So he had a raincoat on?
Well, he didn't have a raincoat on, but he was, he was very...
Disheveled?
Came off like he's just very disheveled, very unorganized, very...
Oh, shucks.
Haphazard.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, don't worry about me. I'm not going to try to intimidate you in any way. And I said, let me assure you, you do not intimidate me. And he was just so charming, saying, now don't worry, until my attorney would object. And the look on his face was so different, and the lips pursed, and this sweet little nice guy, all of a sudden, this Jekyll and Hyde was visible. He asked me what I wanted from this lawsuit, and I said, I want justice, and I want accountability. I want those who did this to be held accountable. And he said, what do you mean justice? And I said, no American citizen should ever go through what my husband and I have gone through and are still going through. What you guys have done is tyrannical. But what you're talking about is my impression of them, of the DOJ. I believe that they truly believe that I and people like me are a threat to the U.S. Treasury, and that they are the noble ones trying to protect the Treasury from us.
Yeah, but that's our money. That's our money. It's not their money.
Think? Right. And we pay his salary, and I told him that day, too.
And are you allowed to say what he said?
He didn't respond much back to me. When I told him that he was that what happened to me was tyrannical, he just, had his head down like he was writing. So he didn't acknowledge it. There were other things that weren't acknowledged. When I say he'll probably have a transcript of this interview, one of the things that he did, Exhibit 41 of that day, was about a 6-inch size notebook, 6-inch thick, of the transcripts of all the interviews that I had ever done, radio, television, Fox News. And by the way, he couldn't pronounce Cavuto's name. So I said, well, I can tell what TV shows you don't watch. And I did say that to him, but they played every single one of those transcripts, all of them. I got to hear them all.
Wow.
And the one thing I did notice, Tim, is how consistent I was. Yay, when you tell the truth, you're consistent. One thing I did say, remember I said to you that the second piece of information, they asked it for 95 pieces of information? My recollection was it was 97. And so on all of those, I said the IRS asked for an additional 97 pieces of information. So after showing me all these transcripts, and he says, now do you stand by everything that you said? I said, yes, I do. He said, well, I just want you to know that I counted, and there were only 95.
Oh, my
I
word.
wanted to laugh.
Oh, my word.
And then I said, off the record, I said, you know, if Obama can run around and visit 57 states, I guess I could say 97 pieces of information. And you know, I never had notes in any of the speeches that I made or even at the press conference, I had no notes. So I just kind of sloughed it off. But his job was to try to discredit me, and he did not succeed.
Well, yeah, I mean, what the government did is abuse its power and intimidate you, or try to intimidate you and others, and try to silence dissent, silence the American people, stamp out the First Amendment, and that's all they can come up with, is that you were inaccurate by 2 digits?
Is 95 pieces of information a little excessive anyway?
Well, 95
Really?
isn't that the number of theses that were nailed to the wall?
Yeah.
There you go. Jenny, thank you for coming on and sharing your experience.
My pleasure.
Jenny Rapini,
My pleasure.
NorCal Tea Party, great American, true patriot, standing up, and we deeply appreciate you here at the Tim Donnelly Show.
We appreciate you too, Tim. Thank
Godspeed.
you. Bye.
Hey, we will be right back after this break. 323-746-TALK. I'd love to hear your impressions of that, or we'll go back to minimum wage. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. You're listening to the Tim Donnelly Show, where we inform, educate, and engage. And if you heard the segment just before this and heard the arrogance and the abuse of power by the IRS toward an ordinary person, a friend of mine, who became an activist with the Tea Party movement, as did thousands of Americans, and the government felt threatened. They felt like you might get control over your money. You know, the money that they hold for you in the Treasury. And I'm curious what you think of it, if you've had encounters with the IRS that are even anywhere close to it. 323-746-TALK is our number. I know the Noskinator had shared an experience on the break where she was always paid her taxes, always was owed money. And then in this recent budget year, when they don't seem to have enough money, all of a sudden they sent her a note, hey, you're going to get a refund. And they sent her another note and said, no, you're screwed. We don't owe you a penny. And next thing you know, they're telling her she's on the phone with them for 2 hours. They can't name any factual case in which she ever owed them any money because she always pays. They're not going to. She pays her taxes. And so what do?
Nothing. They said nothing.
Yeah. So this is the ordinary daily intimidation by a massive government agency that we don't need because they just abuse Americans. We don't need 95,000 employees to collect taxes. We could do this all with a computer. I'm sure many of you out there have thought of this, but if a company, take the largest credit card company in the world, take Apple Computer. Apple Computer, for whatever you think of them, they're the largest distributors of music in the world. They're bigger than Sony. They're bigger than anyone you think of in the music industry because they sell music for what, 99 cents a download?
No, it's now $1.29 download.
Well, what do I know? I actually don't download music. I like the plastic CDs, and look, but they're able to manage all of those accounts. They're able to keep track of each individual, what they paid, what they owed, what they downloaded, all on computer. They don't need 95,000 people. They don't need 95,000 people simply to manage and figure out what you're owed. I mean, that's the part that it's hard for me to believe that our government has never gotten up to speed. And so you have these people that are encased and warehoused in these massive buildings in Washington, D.C. and in other places around the country. And all they are bureaucrats. They're cubicle workers. We don't need them. So why is it that we tolerate and why do we allow them to be armed? That's something nobody's been able to convince me why the IRS needs to be armed. Why do they need M16s? Why do they need to have special types of bullets that Americans can't own, or they want to ban Americans from owning? Why is that? There has to be some justification, but the only thing I can think is when you look at how abusive they were toward Ginny Rapini and her husband, when you look at how abusive they were to Tea Party leaders, and what are Tea Party leaders? They're housewives. They're women who own businesses. They're individuals who stood up and said, we are sick and tired of our government encroaching on our liberties, encroaching on our rights, and we want fiscal accountability. We want constitutional government, limited government, and we want accountability. We want a government that listens to us. What's wrong with that? How can you possibly take issue? Indefensible. Hey, we're going to have a great guest, Karen Veely, coming up talking about a massive abuse case by CPS. We'll be right back after this. Hey, if you like shooting as much as I do, you've probably been to a lot of ranges. Unless you visited Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you've never seen anything like it. On the way there, you'll find yourself taking pictures as you traverse the majestic Azusa Canyon and wind your way up into the Angeles National Forest. With over 600 acres, including 19 private ranges, there's something for everyone. There's rifle and pistol ranges for beginners, right up to advanced shooters. And there's plenty of spaces to shoot sporting clay. You can make a family day of it, or you can bring a group for team building exercises. Bring a picnic lunch. On the weekends, they provide lunch. And don't worry, they always have ammo in case you forget yours or run out. One thing I can guarantee is that once you visited my friends at Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you'll be hooked and you'll keep coming back. burrowcanyon.com is their website, or call them at 626-910-1344, 626-910-1344. Hey, many of you will remember the horrific circumstances of a case right here within the terrestrial listening audience on our affiliate Talk 960. Happened in Palmdale. There was a boy, 8 years old, Gabriel Fernandez, and CPS, that's Child Protective Services, that in some places is called Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, got called 8 or 10 times from different people, a teacher, a grandfather, a neighbor, multiple neighbors, random people in grocery stores. There was a red flag on every corner, and all you had to do is take one look at this poor little boy. And I'll never forget when I met his teacher, who held up a photograph to me, gave me a photograph of him with hollow eyes, pleading eyes. You could see he was a sweet, sweet boy. And he was terrified. And he had black eyes. He had bruises all over his body. And he was holding a poster saying something about how I love you, Mom. And his teacher said he was doing that to keep her from beating him more. Well, it didn't work. And neither did CPS. Child Protective Services never responded to this little boy. They left him to die alone when his mother and his mother's boyfriend or fiance brutally tortured him day after day, shooting him in the eye, shooting him in the face, bullet holes or BB gun holes through his cheek, and then took something and just brutalized him and wounded him and injured him on every part of his body until his body gave up, and they crushed his skull and they killed him. And Child Protective Services finally showed up along with the police to take him away in a body bag. And of course, you know that I called for an audit and a state and spent a lot of time going around the state of California, meeting with people who could help expose this. And you wouldn't believe how far the tentacles of Child Protective Services go. But I'm going to bring on my friend Karen Veely, who is the publisher of Cal Coast News in San Luis Obispo, who dared speak the truth about some government corruption she had uncovered. And Child Protective Services was dispatched to intimidate her into silence, but it didn't work. And Karen, welcome to the Tim Donnelly Show.
Hi, Tim.
It is great to have you on, even though, unfortunately, you have uncovered an horrific case of unspeakable abuse caused by a government agency, Child Protective Services, that pretends that it saves kids and rescues kids. But in this case, I mean, they took a kid out of a family because they were homeless and handed him over to a rapist. Am I making this up?
You're absolutely not making it up. It's a horrific story. But I wanted to say something first. When you're talking about how they're not going after cases of real child abuse, on children that have been beaten or they have had drugs or this type of thing. Those children are often unadoptable. There are a lot of financial strain because it's an expense for the county. And they are not adoptable children, and they are more likely to be given back. Then you have what has become the most common children taken away now, are children that they find, they call it general neglect. And these neglect children, once they're adopted, the county gets funding forever till they're 18 years old, and they have no expense because they're no longer watching. So I believe that many of these counties, the reason that they are so aggressive on children that do not have problems, that are doing well in school, that have no health issues, and they are so aggressive to take those children from their parents when children that have behavioral problems and have been beaten are very often left.
Yeah, so
many people point at financial issues and motivations in counties.
Let me make a comparison then. It's kind of like I always wonder why the cops aren't going after the illegal alien rolling down the road in a beat-up truck that's falling apart. The brake lights don't work. The headlights don't work. The turn signals don't work. And it's spewing out smog. And yet he's unmolested, in part because they probably think it will cost the county or the government money. And they're pulling over the guy in the Cadillac and the Porsche who can pay the big bill.
Absolutely, absolutely. And CPS has become a very large business in the county that I'm in. The Complete Child Protective Agency, and this is for foster children, which does, is more of a cost. But for their employment, their vacation time, and everything, the cost it's right around $22 million a year, and $21 million of that comes in from the feds and the state. But the amount that is coming in for adoptive children again is close to half that. I'm trying to get the exact numbers. I know they paid out $7.5 million to adopted families. What has happened is they've incentivized it. It was the idea was, I think Clinton started it and Obama finished it, but the idea was
that doesn't sound good.
Well, the idea was actually good, though. The idea was there's children languishing in foster care that are never adopted, and they're not adopted because the foster parents are making around $700 a month. The county gets about $14, $15. They keep a chunk, and then they give the foster parents the other chunk. But that didn't continue once the kids were adopted. The money stopped. So their idea was let's incentivize this. Let's continue the money. There's no, all the county has to do now is pass a check and keep their chunk, and we'll continue the money after the children are adopted till they're 18. So it's become very incentivized to get these children out of the system and into a home that's adopting them.
Wow. Well, and obviously that's a huge issue, but it's cases like the one that you sent me that are getting the headlines because it really shows that it might be the financial incentives that are causing them to pull kids out of homes and put them up for adoption to keep their budget going. But it's the kids who are paying. Yeah. I mean, here you've got a 12-year-old girl who is now 18 who was pulled out of a family, and it looks like it wasn't as if the parents had abused her in any way. They were just homeless. Is that your reading of it?
Well, there is, and I have the entire case file here. It goes a little farther than that. The parents they were living in South Carolina, and the father was working. They had 3 children. They moved back to San Luis Obispo in an RV with a job at a Chevrolet, one of the auto dealerships. And the man there was allowing them to sleep in the RV there while they looked for a home. They joined homeless services here not because they were staying there at night, but they went over and they asked them if they could help them get into permanent housing and a rental. The man was working full time. At the time also, though, the wife has bipolar, and she went in and was having her medication changed. And she decided not to be hospitalized during the change because her husband needed her to watch the children. While they were over at the Prado Day Center, and she was giving the kids showers, they sent her there as just covered in lice. And the children had lice, so she was de-licing the child, and she called her mother a curse word, and she went to smack her mouth open-handed and hit her nose. The head of the shelter then called CPS and claimed that the child said that she had been punched in the nose, which is much more aggressive. The police department came, arrested the woman, and later determined that she had never been punched in the nose, that it had been an open hand. It was not as reported by the head of the shelter at the time.
But by that time, they had taken the children, right?
Well, no, they hadn't taken the children, but here's where it gets. They had let the mother had agreed to go in and have her medicine changed at mental health services for a week, and the father then went to stay in a motel with the kids for a week and took off work. Well, then he wasn't working, and they were irritated that he wasn't working at that point for the week, and he got a call and said, "What will you do when you're next week?" And he said, "My wife will be out. She'll watch the children." Well, no, we don't want your wife around the children anymore because she slapped the one child. And he said, I'm going to have my wife come home. Shortly after that, he got a call from Prado, from D. Torres, the head of the Prado Day Center, who is married to a county supervisor here, and was asked to bring the children in. Now, in the court records, she made a call and claimed that the little girl was walking around asking men to sleep with her, and the father was trying to find someone to sell the children to. This has been rebuked. There was never any sexual abuse found in medical reports and later investigation. Plus, other people that worked at the Prado Day Center, the homeless center, that were around the family, much more than this woman, said the allegations were completely false.
Okay, so let me stop you. Let me stop you for a minute. So you're saying that a social worker made up this claim, or somebody associated with this Prado Center made up a claim, and they took the children away because of that?
It was partly because it was the person who worked at the Prado Day Center, but you have to understand, Capsule, which runs the center, was getting money from CPS to work with them with children. So they were actually getting a check from CPS, and as they were turning over children, grant money. So what happens is the father shows up, and he has a policeman and 2 social workers, and they say, we can arrest you and investigate these claims and take the children, or you can allow us to take the children and sign here, and we will do the investigation, then you can get them back.
Karen Veely, we got to take we got to take a break, okay. So we'll get to the rest of the story right after this. We're talking with Karen Veely, the publisher of Cal Coast News, but a 12-year-old who was put in the hands of a rapist by the government. You've heard me talk about Burro Canyon Shooting Park on this show many times. They've been a proud sponsor of the Tim Donnelly Show. And I want to let you know they've got a special offer. If you pay for a day of shooting at Burro Canyon Shooting Park and you mention the Tim Donnelly Show, you get a free hat or a coffee cup or both, as long as supplies last. So head on up to my favorite place to exercise our Second Amendment right, Burro Canyon Shooting Park. Hey, you are listening to the Tim Donnelly Show, and we have been talking about Child Protective Services, about a very complicated case in San Luis Obispo. But the bottom line is the government took a child, a 12-year-old girl, away from her parents, who clearly had problems, but they were working hard to try to work through them. They were homeless. Last time I checked, that's not a crime. They were seeking some help, and in the end, the government took their daughter and put him in the hands of a rapist who raped her repeatedly and sexually assaulted her for all the years that she lived at this home, starting at age 12. And the story has been broken by my friend Karen Veely, who is the publisher of the Cal Coast News. Karen, this story is just horrific on so many different levels. It is heartbreaking. How in the world could this happen How could nobody
Well, it
know about
happens.
it? Don't they do any checks on these kids after they send them off somewhere?
Not when they're adopted, but let me correct a couple things. The parents lost their parental rights. They had an 8-year-old, I think a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old at the time the parental rights were severed. All 3 children were placed in the house, a home of a family that, according to court records, the judge found more stable and better parents because they had a house and money and this type of thing. So the children ended up placed with a home that wasn't their parents. And you are hundreds of times more likely to be abused by not your real parents, adoptive or foster parents. So they took them from the one parents, and they used things that have been proven. Police reports said the child was not punched. Regardless, that was used throughout the paperwork.
I know, but Karen, slow down.
They took them for false reasons.
Slow down.
Yes.
Most people, look, if you have raised a teenager or a child from 0 to teenage, I don't know what the heck happens to them when they hit teenage years. If your kids don't say "I hate you" once a day, if they aren't screaming at you, you're not doing a very good job as a parent. Okay, that it just happens because you go through these hormonal changes and everything else. So for a mother to slap her daughter who cussed at her is not unheard of. It is not some kind of massive crime for which she should have her child taken away and handed over to a rapist. And yet, with CPS and in the world of CPS, there is no evidence because evidence is whatever the individuals who basically are all in cahoots with the courts say that evidence is.
Yes, there is no discovery in family court. The parents don't know what the charges are because they're not shown the documentation. The lawyers on behalf of the children and families are paid for by the court. They're all working together, and very often inaccuracies and lies never come out until after you've lost your child and you appeal, and then you finally see how your child was taken.
Yeah, but here's my question. So you've got these children living with this so-called nice guy, Robert Bergner, who evidently now, how did the information come out that she had been sexually assaulted all this time? What happened?
What happened was the child turned 18. She went to her adopted mother and told her the man had been raping her, and there was rape, sodomy, child porn. The mother did not believe her. They took the child's car away. They took away her college fund. They took a lot of her belongings away. She then moved out. And after she moved out, she went to the police department or to law enforcement and explained what had happened. They raided the house and they found pictures of this child naked on computers of the father.
Wow.
So they were able to verify the counts. But there's even more to this. The children did not have birthday parties, I was told. I've talked to family members. The youngest child, a punishment for starting a Facebook page was a year grounding from her phone and from being allowed to go to family vacations and activities.
Wow.
And a shaming like that would be very hard on a 14-year-old girl.
Well, yeah. I mean, 14, 15-year-olds. I have a 15-year-old son right now. And, you know, if he doesn't get his way, he gets really, really mad. But you know what? As his dad, I might feel for him, but I also need to make sure that he learns lessons and makes good choices. And that's a real tough thing. And so you, to a certain extent, you have to ignore them. They're going to do stupid things, and you can't bring the death penalty for every offense.
No, and to be prohibited from family vacations and family activities for an entire year seems very harsh for a child that age. That's
abusive. It really is. There's a level here of I don't even. It's an emotional abuse. It is a. It's hard to put into words, but I think you said it well before. That when you put children in the hands of people who are not their biological parents, and study after study has shown that if children are in the hands of their biological parents, even if their parents are not perfect, even if their parents are defective, they tend to do better and be happier in life than if they're raised by complete strangers who are in it for the money.
Yes. Our prison system I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's very high, and it's more than half of everyone in the prison system was taken from their parents at some point and either put into foster homes or adopted. So this is the effect on society as a whole, and the long-term cost is very large. One of the things, too, that CPS failed here is they told the parents, and which is common in SLO County, that you would be able to see and talk to your children after you sign away. We take this away. If you don't fight us too much, well, we'll do a mediation, which they did, and we promise that you'll have contact, you'll have pictures, you see report cards. And time again, I've been told as soon as the paperwork's signed and it's over, they're told, hey, we've changed our mind. The adoptive parents don't want to do it. If the parents had contact, I think it would be much less likely that this abuser could have abused them for all this years.
That's a
if
very
they had followed their promises.
That's a very good point. And we're unfortunately we're out of time, Karen. But thank you for coming on and talking about this important issue. The government abusing citizens, even children. More coming up. Your calls after the break. If you've been listening long to the Tim Donnelly Show, you know that we talk constantly about defending freedom and about defending our natural inalienable rights. The Firearms Policy Coalition is a partner of the Tim Donnelly Show. But more than that, they're on the front lines every day in Sacramento and all across the state, in the courts, defending your Second Amendment right. That is a natural right that the government merely acknowledged in the Second Amendment. If you value your freedom, then you need to join Firearms Policy Coalition. Become a member. I'm a member, and I'm happy to support an organization that is doing such an incredible job. Go to joinfpc.org. The Tim Donnelly Show sent you. Or go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on the FPC link to make it easy. But whatever you do, join today. fpc.org. So I guess it's the hour of government abuse. First, we had the IRS abusing ordinary citizens who wanted to organize and try to hold their government accountable. Last time I checked, we always hear from these politicians of both parties, oh, you need to get involved. Then you get involved and they audit you. You get involved and you start to make effective opposition to their tyranny, and they intimidate you. They try to scare you into silence. I see a lot of similarities between the government, the IRS, and this rapist. Here he goes, he rapes a child after the government hands over these children to a guy that was supposed to be this pillar of the community, but instead he started raping a 12-year-old, and I'm sure he told her afterwards, you better not tell anyone, or I'll kill you, or I'll kill your brothers and sisters. I mean, think about that. But it's the same exact thing. Why do we tolerate this? The more and more and more that I see our government in action, the more I believe we need to enforce the Constitution on them. We need to start throwing government officials up against the wall, throwing some freaking handcuffs on them, citizens arrest, and then drag them off to a citizen's prison. Because they're the ones who are abusing their power. And that is a crime not only against the Constitution, that's a crime against the people. That's a crime against our trust. That's a crime against the whole concept of self-rule. when you allow someone who has been lent the power by the people to abuse it and to do it repeatedly, and there's no recompense. I mean, look, now this woman, Jenny Rapini, running a tea party up north, has to spend her time suing the government. That's got to be a lot of fun. When she's able to pull in one attorney, they've got 6 spread out all over the country, texting questions to their mouthpiece. But that little 12-year-old girl didn't have anybody, because once the county had made their money off her plight, once they had successfully removed her from a family that was troubled but loving, obviously the parents cared about the kids. The father was struggling to make a living. They were living in an RV, and the mother was bipolar, and she was switching her medication, which can make anybody crazy. I mean, if you're a parent of teenagers, you're already half crazy. That's just life. That's just every day. There was no abuse. But the government has all these rules with which they can remove your children. And you know, this is very significant, especially in light of this forced vaccination law, because I predict you might not care about the whole SB 277 issue. You might think it doesn't affect you at all. But would you like children removed from parents who are otherwise loving parents? They might disagree with you on whether to vaccinate their kids or not, but otherwise they're wonderful, amazing, loving parents. And I predict, because there's such a small segment of the population, I predict that what lie ahead, if we are not successful in qualifying this referendum, and I pray to God that we are, what lies ahead is CPS being empowered to use vaccination status as an excuse to raid a home, to steal a child, and say that they're not providing adequate medical care because the state has passed this law and they're homeschooling their kids, which puts them at risk. It's going to make them socially stunted, and it's going to lead to all these problems. And so we, in the interest of society, the state must now take control of these children. And whenever the state takes control of your children, I'm just going to tell you right now, the chances of your child being abused when they wind up in a foster home, when they wind up in a shelter or some kind of an orphanage that's run by the state, or some government nonprofit that's funded by the state. Children that are sold into the sex trade, that are trafficked into the sex trade, 70% of them come from foster homes or are caught up in the foster system in some capacity. That ought to tell you something. God gave children to the parents, and the state should be a lot slower to remove children unless there is clear-cut danger to the life of the child, whether it is sexual abuse or physical abuse. And the rest of it, they just need to stay out of our business, because no parent is perfect. And they do more harm than good. Now, I support the idea of being able to rescue children like they should have rescued Gabriel Fernandez. And when I was in the legislature, I pushed for a law called Sammy's Law, because Sammy's mom had the forethought to videotape CPS and the cops in action. And I think every interaction between Child Protective Services and parents, Child Protective Services and a child, whether they're interviewing them or not, should all be video recorded. And I proposed a law to do that. Of course, the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, yes, a public sector union, one of the largest in the country, they bribe a lot of your elected officials, and they bribed that bill into an early death. And more kids will be abused, more kids will be raped, and more kids will die at the hands and because of Child Protective Services having no accountability, being able to hide behind secrecy when in fact they're committing more harm than anything they're alleging most of the parents do, simply because they thrive off of stealing kids and kidnapping them for cash because it pays their bills and they get to keep a job. That's the bottom line. We have a government whose entire purpose is not the original purpose of the Declaration of Independence. It's not to protect and safeguard the inalienable rights that of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government's singular purpose at almost every level is its own perpetuation. It is to guarantee jobs for me and my posse, me and my bureaucrats, me and all of the people who work with me. My job as a mid-level manager is to defend my fiefdom and make sure I'm in the budget line next year, whether I'm needed or not, whether our government should even be doing this or not. And of course, the politicians are terrified of large numbers of people who join unions who can then take money away from each union member to use for political purposes. And if you don't support that bureaucracy's mission, they're going to make it their mission in life to take you out. Simple as that. So in the interim, while Child Protective Services might protect a handful of kids here and there, by and large, they are in the exact same business as every other government bureaucracy, perpetuating their own survival so that they're in next year's budget and they all have jobs and they have funding so that they basically don't have to do anything. And the kids are the ones who pay. Tragic. The good news, the killers of Gabriel Fernandez got the death penalty. Now, it'll probably take 20 years before we can affect that. But after what they did to Gabriel, it's the only just punishment. I just wish we could give the death penalty to Child Protective Services as it is currently operating. I wish we could shut it down, abolish it, and start over with some simple rules and some guidelines and not a massive bureaucracy that has to kidnap kids for cash in order to keep itself in a job. I don't know. What about you? 323-746-TALK. We'll take your calls coming up after this short break. Hey, if you like shooting as much as I do, you've probably been to a lot of ranges. Unless you visited Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you've never seen anything like it. On the way there, you'll find yourself taking pictures as you traverse the majestic Azusa Canyon and wind your way up into the Angeles National Forest. With over 600 acres, including 19 private ranges, there's something for everyone. There's rifle and pistol ranges for beginners, right up to advanced shooters. And there's plenty of spaces to shoot sporting clay. You can make a family day of it, or you can bring a group for team building exercises. Bring a picnic lunch. On the weekends, they provide lunch. And don't worry, they always have ammo in case you forget yours or run out. One thing I can guarantee is that once you visited my friends at Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you'll be hooked and you'll keep coming back. BurroCanyon.com is their website, or call them at 626-910-1344, 626-910-1344. So did you hear the latest news? There is an official bid now by Mark Meadows, who I believe is from North Carolina. He has filed a motion to replace the embattled, whining crybaby speaker John Boehner with someone else. And boy, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, Boehner is Obama's best friend. Why is he even a Republican? Every time Obama turns around, all he has to do is say, "Hey, John, come on, Air Force One, let me flash the pearly whites at you and, give you the time of day." And next thing you know, John is there smiling, "Hey, I'm Obama's best friend. Whatever he needs." He doesn't care about the people who sent him there. And it's embarrassing as a Republican that he is even the Speaker of the House. It's also embarrassing that Mitch McConnell is still in power. It's going to be very interesting because there's an official process. He's filed a motion to vacate the chair. And if that is successful, I would force a new election. And one thing Republicans hate, they don't want to air out their dirty laundry. Anybody who gets out of line, they just viciously punish them behind the scenes and hope that nobody will cover it in the news. But there's not much they can do because this is a public matter, and this could really set up an embarrassing vote of no confidence for John Boehner. And even though he has tended to fend off discontent from conservatives, I'm thinking maybe his time has run out. It's going to be very interesting. We will keep watching that. In other news, meanwhile, in California, many of you who have been following the issue of SB 277 will be pleased to know that an effort to recall Senator Richard Pan has been cleared for signatures. They met the requirements, and it looks like a recall election against Dr. Richard Pan, California state senator, author, champion of forced vaccinations, or your kid gets kicked out of school, is going to move forward. That will absolutely be a very interesting race to watch because there's a tremendous amount of anger around the state and around the country from people who, I don't know, they have this radical idea that parents are the ones who ought to make decisions about a kid's health. I can tell you what, I would never trust the government to make a decision for my kid. I inform myself, I make my own decisions. Now, I might trust my wife's opinion and consult my wife's opinion, but I ain't asking the government, and I'm not deferring that decision to the government. You see the damage that they do when they, in one case, they fail to act. In other cases, they're kidnapping kids because the mother wants a second medical opinion, like baby Sammy up in Sacramento, and then in cases like Gabriel Fernandez, they just leave him to die. But they come in and they take 3 kids from a homeless family that were struggling financially, but they were starting to get their head above water. They took their children, and for 6 years, the 12-year-old daughter was raped by the man that the government CPS handed the children over to. That's your government in action. After hearing stories like that, I want a whole lot less government, don't you? I mean, whatever happened to literally just doing the duties that were enumerated in the Constitution? I need a government that will secure the border. Oh, epic fail there. I need a government that will will build and maintain infrastructure. That means highways, bridges, water, energy. Every time you turn around, every one of those things are in sad shape. I just went on a road trip. You ever wonder why people get in the fast lane and never move out? It's because the trucks don't destroy the highway in the fast lane. And I drove in the fast lane the whole way because the freeways suck. They're falling apart. They're damaging your car as you drive over it. And you're the one paying all these taxes to fix the freaking roads. And they want to build some stupid train out in the middle of nowhere with billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars we don't have. They're stealing people's land to do it. And they don't want to fix the highways, which are the infrastructure of the state. It's not like you can go out and pave your own highway. I can figure out what to do with my kids. It ain't your business, government. Get the hell out. Go fix the roads. Take the money, shut down CPS, cut it down to about 1/10 of what it is, stay out of people's lives. It'll cost a lot less, and fix the highways, build the dams, and make sure the electrical grid works. And I don't care if you use solar or wind or whatever. I don't want that mandated. I think that's stupid. Technology will come in and transform that market when that technology makes sense. When the government forces it, we always overpay, and then it winds up making us uncompetitive with other states. Are we out of time? Oh my gosh. Hey, I want to say thank you to everyone who makes this show possible. God bless you and Godspeed. Tim Donnelly, show out.